Welcome to sequence 2 of the massive open online course, Fundamentals in Purchasing and Supply Management. Today's topic is PSM organization and roles. First, regarding the learning goals. The first goal is that you gather a basic understanding of the role of a PSM department and a variety of specific job roles. The second learning goal is that you are aware of different organizational models for a purchasing and supply management department and what impacts of such models are on processes, job roles, and also on PSM performance. The third learning goal is that you are aware of the influencing factors, so why certain organizational models are chosen, being it internal factors, external factors, and also moderators that play a role. First, regarding the relevance of the organizational structure for performance. The first point to note is that nowadays companies buy oftentimes more than 50% of their internal value creation or get their internal value creation from suppliers. So that means that PSM can have a very huge impact on financial performance. The second point is that even beyond financial performance, there are other points where suppliers can make crucial contributions, such as innovation and also sustainability. Third to consider is that PSM is an internal service provider having internal clients. So depending on how well the needs of these internal clients are fulfilled, we have a huge impact on internal customer service satisfaction. And the other side, not this internal customer side, but the external side, is that PSM is the manager of the external supplier network, deciding and driving whether efficiency is high and whether quality from the external supplier network is high. Finally, we have to consider that PSM as a department can also provide stimuli to the overall organization by finding interesting new products or finding new suppliers. They could even shape the future of the company itself. Continuing with the question now, what does an organization in PSM look like? There are two basic questions that need to be answered. The first one is, which dimensions dominate the organizational setup? And the second one is, after we have made that choice, that first choice, to decide a few other structural aspects. But we will see more about that now in the next minutes. Coming to the overall model that we are going to go through in the next slides, you see here that there is one central part, which is the actual model. So now from now on called the Purchasing and Supply Organization, abbreviated PSO. Here you can see that we have basically 4 different dimensions that we can choose from. These are the so-called macro level. And then we have, after we have made that choice, several things to decide on the micro level, like it is called here. That is how the model looks like. But now the question, why would it look a certain way? If you look to the left, you can see that we have external factors and we have internal factors that both drive the choice of a certain organizational model. And also taking effect, we have moderators that shape how the organizational model is designed. Depending on how well the model fits to these conditions, there is a higher or a lower effect on purchasing and supply management performance. The performance you can see on the right is shown as the classical criteria that we know, like cost, quality, and time. But there are also others to consider, like we already a bit mentioned, flexibility, innovation, and sustainability. Now let's go to that first part regarding the model as such, looking at the 4 different dimensions that we can choose from. The first one we can decide to take is to design by category. That is one of the most popular choices in practice nowadays, meaning that we find something like a sub-department, IT services sourcing, or raw material sourcing, or marketing services sourcing. The second choice that we could make is to design by business unit or product line. If you imagine a car manufacturer and that it would organize by business to business, so trucks and lorries, and by a line business to customers, so passenger cars, it would mean that for both these different parts of the business, they install different procurement departments. The third option that we have is to design by geography. Then we can design our PSM organization, for example, by region. Then we would have one for Asia Pacific, one for North America, one for Latin America, one for Europe, for example. Or if we go by country, likewise by Germany, France, etc. The final one that we can choose is to design by activity. And in that case, it is that the organization is clustered into certain areas, the, let's say, most straightforward differentiation being into strategic and operational tasks, and even having different managers for these different parts of the organization. So these are the four that we can choose on the macro level. Now, on the micro level, after we have made our choice, we also have to decide on those criteria which are shown here. So I already mentioned that centralization is one of the most popular ones and is also oftentimes a bit confused with being a macro dimension, but it is not. We can make our choice on macro and now still operate either central or decentral, and that refers to where the level of authority is. The other micro ones which we should keep in mind are the level of formalization, how formalized our organization is run, how specialized we can be, how standardized, and also how the level of participation is looking like. That very much refers to being able to work cross-functionally within the company. Then this was about how can it look like. Now we're coming to what shapes our choice. And we're turning first to the external factors. Regarding the external factors, we have two main ones which play a role here. The first one is the environmental complexity. So do we have a small or large number of suppliers? What's the pace of technological advance and the like? And the second is the environmental dynamism. So are we in a very turbulent market environment, or are we in a very stable market environment? These are the main two ones that affect us here. Then, looking at the internal factors that influence our choice, we have quite a range here. The first one being, what is our purchasing strategy, which should be ideally derived from the corporate strategy. Then we have how our supplier management looks like. We have the level of purchasing maturity, meaning how well developed our organization already is. Cross-functional alignment processes, so more about the internal side again. Technology in use, so we can either be somebody being at the forefront of IT infrastructure, or we could be on the laggard side. The level of purchasing coherence, that means how well we are capturing synergies between different areas, such as my example with the passenger cars and the trucks. And finally, well, another internal factor that could influence us are other corporate strategic initiatives. So if there are other projects ongoing which have an effect on the PSO, they might also shape the choice of the actual model. The moderators that play a role for us are the following two. Size, as was shown in the model. A larger organization has a tendency to specialize more and to have a more complex organizational structure as well. But there is a second one that's worth mentioning, which is certain actors or actor groups, which could be, for example, consultants coming in a very different project maybe, but with their recommendations having an effect on the shape of our procurement department structure. Or there's a change of the chief procurement officer. Anecdotal evidence shows that he or she might actually decide to change the structure, taking on a new job, a new assignment in a company. The best known example on the micro level, just a few words about it for a second, because it is so often confused with actual structure, is centralization. As you can see here on this slide, we have certain advantages and disadvantages. What is very much worth highlighting is that there is an intermediate version between centralized and decentralized, which is called here center-led, but in fact can also be called hybrid. So just to be aware that there are nowadays opportunities to combine the best of both. Now, these were until here all basics about how to structure the PSO, how it looks like on macro level and on micro level. If you want to put it all into an org chart, you still need reporting lines. And as you can see here, they have three basic ways of showing reporting lines. The first being that we can show it in a so-called tiered model, which is also one of the most popular. The siloed model in the middle, and on the right you can see the matrixed model. In the siloed and matrixed model, one employee has multiple supervisors, which also in the last years has been one of the factors that was mentioned as one of the potential detriments. The example I will show very soon is one of a tiered model. Now, within such an organizational structure, so now with all we have heard about, we're able to draw an organizational chart. We're turning to who is actually working in these structures, and this is what brings us to job roles and profiles. Depending on how we have organized, we have different ways, we have different structures, different cuts of how job profiles are referring to that structure. Typical profiles, as they are listed here, of course, the head of such a department, a CPO, but can also be, depending on the structure, the head of purchasing or the head of sourcing or head of strategic sourcing. We can have a supply relationship manager. It really depends on how the macro and micro decisions have been turning out. And we should be aware that there are also new roles coming up, as there are external challenges that PSM is facing, such as, for example, sustainability. So we see an increasing number of sustainability managers or responsible sourcing managers, risk managers, and the like. Now, you might wonder how the career of someone in purchasing and supply management might look like. Here you can see the typical three potential paths on the right, as starting as a young professional, either taking a leadership path, taking the expert path, or taking the project path. And on the left, here for your reference, a few ideas how different job titles relate to each other. So functional buyer versus strategic buyer, but it really depends on the company context. This is just one example. Now, turning to an example from practice, you see here the so-called GCC case, Global Chemical Company, and it's an illustration of how this macro structure gives us a very good way of seeing through a current structure and a future structure of a PSO. On the left, you see the before. So on the global level, here we have the CPO, and in this case, it was a he. He had direct reports being category managers, being country managers, and one department responsible for performance management. On the local level, each of the sites within a country had their own small procurement department, which was doing everything for that particular site. So it was organized by geography as well. If we look at the after structure, what has happened is that on this local layer, the organization has changed from a geography point of view, geography orientation, towards an activity orientation. So strategic, transactional, and more performance-related activities have been separated. And within that first pillar that we see here, the strategic sourcing, there is even a subdimension chosen of category. What this enables, and you can see it with the dotted lines, is that in the after model, we have a clear connection between the global and the local level for the strategic sourcing part by category. And we also have something similar for performance management, in that there is a direct connection between local performance management and global performance management. If one would just look at the level of centralization, to again bring up this example, not much would have changed. But if we look with our view of the 4 macro structural dimensions and all the different micro, we see that a lot has actually changed in this particular case. So, finalizing, we come to the lessons learned. After having had this overview, now, we have seen the basic role of a PSM department and how a variety of specific job profiles works within such a department. We have talked about different organizational models and how they affect processes, job roles, and performance. And we have also covered the internal and external factors, as well as the moderators that play a role on how the PSM organization looks like within a company. The final notes here are our references, so you find more literature here. And with that, I thank you very much.